This Budapest Business Journal podcast was recorded at the CEO breakfast briefing held at the Anantara New York Palace Hotel on September the 28th, 2022. The roundtable is part of a series organised by the German-Hungarian Chamber of Industry and Commerce in partnership with the Budapest Business Journal. The discussion features State Secretary for Energy and Climate Policy, Attila Steiner, Managing Director of Linde Gáz Magyarország, Ákos Hegedűs, Head of Group Strategy at MOL Group, Viktor Sverla, and András Sávos, President of the German-Hungarian Chamber and Vice President, Head of Digitalization and Process Optimization at Knorr-Bremse. Questions were asked by BBJ Editor-in-Chief, Robin Marshall. Look out also for a videocast from this event on our YouTube channel and other podcasts on budapestbusinessjournal.com. Thank you for listening to this BBJ podcast. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the second CEO breakfast briefing organised by the German-Hungarian Chamber of Commerce and Industry and the Budapest Business Journal, where the theme of our roundtable this morning is the future of energy. We've already met our first speaker, Attila Steiner, State Secretary for Energy and Climate Policy at the Ministry of Technology and Industry. The rest of our panel are Ákos Hegedűs, Managing Director of Linde Gáz Magyarország Zrt. András Sávos, President of the German-Hungarian Chamber of Industry and Commerce, but here as Vice President, Head of Digitalization and Process Optimization at Knorr-Bremse AG. And Viktor Sverla, Head of Group Strategy at MOL Group. Your panel, ladies and gentlemen. Am I? Yes, I am. I like it when a plan comes together. I wish it would say more often. One very quick note, which is that the State Secretary and one of our guests have a hard stop at 9:30. I think you have to be off for something exciting, which I hope we're going to talk about, involving hydrogen gas. So I'm going to try and push this through as quickly as possible. Gentlemen, if you can be brief in your answers, it would help us in achieving that. Let's start with you, State Secretary, if we may. The European Commission outlined some detailed proposals. What's the government reaction to those? Do you broadly think, I mean, we know that there are some areas where there's a very strong difference of opinion, caps on prices being the most obvious example, but broadly speaking, is there material to work with there? Do you think you're possibly winning the argument on state intervention?
Yes, it's a very recent task for us to evaluate all of the proposals of the European Commission. Actually, today they will publish a detailed proposal again. The European Commission put forward 5 possible interventions approximately 2 weeks ago, out of which there are some proposals of how to reduce consumption in the electricity sector, how to decouple gas prices from electricity prices, and how to intervene and basically to redistribute windfall profits, which are at several companies due to the high electricity prices. So on those proposals, we are quite supportive, and we have already introduced several of them before the European Commission came out with the proposal. This is very important, for example, this redistribution question, since I think now for the Hungarian economy, it's key that our national electricity company, NBM, remains stable. And actually, NBM is now covering all of the households in case of electricity and natural gas. And of course, regulated tariffs put some burden also on NBM. But how to make NBM stable in terms of financing, this is crucial because NBM is purchasing all of the natural gas, which is fed into our underground gas storages. So basically for winter preparation, NBM has a crucial role. And that's why we introduced a so-called overhead compensation fund in the state budget with a very significant amount of allocated funds. And that fund is now connected with NVM in order to compensate the losses. So that enables that NVM can remain stable, and also the rating of NVM is remain the same. So I think this is a very crucial question, and that's why we introduced already several measures out of those proposals. Secondly, what is maybe the most conflicting proposal? This is the price cap on natural gas. And here, I think our region, Central Eastern European region, has is in a quite a different situation than other countries, since in this region the dependence on Russian natural gas is above 80%. And what we see as a very significant risk, if there is any price cap on Russian gas introduced, then the Russian party will say we will not deliver any gas. And that's what we would like to avoid. So we need natural gas. We cannot cope with such a situation where 80% of the supply will be cut, who knows for how long time. So that's why we opposed very vocally that proposal, but I have to say we were not the only ones. Austria, Slovakia, Czech Republic was also against this proposal. And as a consequence, what I see, and now I'm very curious what will be the Commission's proposal, this idea is set aside, that there will be a dedicated price cap on Russian originated natural gas. Now there is another idea to introduce a general price cap in Europe, but here we do not know the details still of how the European Commission would like to execute that, because of course it would impact also other suppliers, also LNG supplies. So what we are seeing as a risk, that we introduce a price cap with the purpose that we would like to reduce the price niveau in Europe. But if there will be less gas in Europe, then prices will jump. So actually we can very easily achieve the opposite result what we wanted to achieve. So here I think there will be very interesting discussions this Friday in Brussels.
Very, very quickly, there were 5 points for you're broadly in agreement with. Do you think it's possible that fifth point, that the price cap is so contentious, or so complex, that they move forward with the 4 today, and we'll come back with something on the price cap later?
Actually, that's happening because 2 weeks ago the European Commission concluded that for the 4 points there is quite a general agreement. Right. And now, in the meantime, they are working on the price cap issue, and they will come up with new proposals, and that's ongoing.
Excellent, thank you for that clarification. Viktor Sverla, I'd like to turn to you now. What's the reaction of MOL Group to the Commission proposal, in particular on the windfall taxes? And more generally, perhaps, because we hear a lot of talk, we don't often get the chance to actually ask someone who's involved directly. What is happening with your business? Because you have you're pulled in, it seems to me, in 2 directions. On the one hand, you've had a cap imposed on fuel pump prices in Hungary, we all know that. On the other, the prices of oil and gas, which you extract, have been soaring. So where do you fall in the balance between there? How is the business doing? And then we'll get back to your reaction to the Commission proposal.
Yeah, thank you. So first of all, let's split this question into 2. So I think there's the price cap question, and there's the windfall tax, or well, as the EU calls it, solidarity contribution question. So regarding price caps, it's not a secret that we are not a big fan of price caps as MOL Group. And just to refer to the gas price cap, as an economist, I cannot imagine how such a thing could work. It's just, we need the gas, we have to import it, we have to practically, we have to win the bids on the market. So someone brings us the gas what we need. So I don't see a real chance to make something really efficient and work in this matter. It is not just for gas, it's for any product. If there's a price cap which is too low, it will lead sooner or later to undersupply. And although we are doing our best in Hungary, but the situation with fuel is not as we got used to it in the last 20-30 years. We had to limit the supplies to some of our customers to be able to supply all our customers. So it's for the sake of everyone that you can get fuel anywhere you need it. And also on the service stations, you can meet with these limits. It depends on which service station you try to fill your car, but there's a maximum limit you can pump. So this is how we can maintain stability more or less of the market. But price caps always distort the market very much, and as a temporary, very short-term policy reaction for a temporary shock, they can be a good solution. But if they stay with us, they are just killing the economy. It's also, they are not just preventing imports, but also they diminish the price signal, so demand doesn't decrease. That's what it should. If we have some scarce resource, then either supply should be increased or demand should be decreased. So as a temporary measure, it can be a good tool, but on the longer term, it's rather harmful for the economy. If we look at the solidarity contribution or this extraordinary tax or windfall tax or whatever, of course a company is not happy if they get an extraordinary tax. But we have to be reasonable, and we know very well also that these energy prices, especially gas price and electricity price, which is pushed up by the gas price, they are not sustainable, and they harm the economy very much. And if the economy is harmed, and if we hit a recession, which is practically inevitable with such high energy prices, it's very bad for the energy companies as well. Our products prices are the most volatile, so if a recession comes, we will lose the most practically. So as a temporary measure, again, I think it's very reasonable in the current situation that governments are introducing this. It's very understandable. Governments have to act, as Mr. Steiner said. I very much agree with that, and it's the sake of everyone to keep our economies as stable as possible. And in such an extraordinary situation, we have to rethink redistribution and try to help the ones most in need by actually capping the surplus profits of some sectors which are earning more than usual in the situation. So, and regarding the EU price cap, EU taxes, I think if some extraordinary taxes are introduced, it's better if it's on EU level than if it's on state level, because this is an international market. Mm-hmm. And if everybody pays the same, the less the distortion is. So that's pretty logical, and I don't say that EU should gather these funds. It's not about that. But if there's a EU framework on how much this should be, I think it helps the market. And also it's very, very important that in many countries, like in Hungary as well, we already have windfall type of levies. If the EU solidarity contribution is introduced, it must not be on top of what we already have. So the EU, then again, there's no solidarity between the countries, and then again the international market is again distorted, and it's I think it's in general tax is a state competence. So that's why the EU calls this a contribution actually. So and the EU should not take this competence from the states, but I think some general framework can have the market, but it has to work together and has to be compatible with the state level regulations and so on. So if these two don't come together, then it doesn't have much.
I don't think there's any business sector or field that would say it's a fan of caps or special taxes anyway. So I don't think no one will be surprised to hear you say that. One point you didn't answer, and obviously you're not going to give business secrets, but how is the business overall? Are you in profit? Are you where you expected to be? Are you ahead of where you expected to be?
It's hard to say what we expected now, because expectations change practically every day. It's not even every week or month. It's really hard to forecast anything. So it was generally MOL gives a guidance for its EBITDA in its flash reports, and we were thinking like for a week what to say at the half-year results. so it's generally an uncertain industry. I mean, the prices are volatile and things can change very quickly, but you can put all this to the square or whatever now. So it's I can say that the first half was okay. We had good results in the first half, even together with the windfall levy. So we don't try to deny that, and that's why I say that some windfall levy as a temporary measure is acceptable to stabilize the economy, but also it's very important not to take more from the companies than what's really needed, because on the other side we also have a huge investment burden. We have to invest in the green energy transition, which we knew. We started to work into this direction in 2016 already. Actually, MOL was amongst the first oil and gas companies who said it would transform into a sustainable company. And we started this journey, but on top of this, the Russian invasion came, and now we have to invest also into supply security. And the gas is on MVM side and is on the government side practically, but regarding oil and fuels, it's MOL's responsibility to ensure security of supply. So it's important that only really the surplus is taken, and the operation of the companies is not endangered by these levies.
There's a very quite a cliche, but you don't kill the golden goose, so you have to pitch it right. This all sounds quite theoretical, but of course it's also real world problems. So, András, I imagine Knorr-Bremse is a fairly heavy energy user. Could you give us some idea of how much your energy costs have risen, and whether you think enough is being done to help business?
So good morning to everyone, also from my side. Actually, we are an industrial company, heavily manufacturing different parts for the world. So actually, yes, we have also problem with energy, but on the other hand, let me say, we have luck also. We have long-term contracts for electricity, mainly. Our gas consumption is also significant, but not as significant as our electricity consumption. So because that our machines, that our assembly lines are working with electricity. So the first one is that 2 years ago, our central purchasing decided to make long-term contract. And this time we were not sure whether this is a good approach or not. Actually, we heavily criticized this time, this long-term contract. But now that we are enjoying absolutely that result now. And I think that certainly we have problem, but now we have a little bit more time to think about what to do as next. This is the first pillar of our action. The second one, our sustainability program. And because I think that recently the sustainability and energy has certain and very well established connections. And we started this sustainability program 20 years ago. We started with soft things and soft factors to influence people in this direction, and in the last 5, 7, 8 years we invested also in sustainable energy supplies. So this time we were not very happy with the speed with that, but right now that we can see the results out of that, and right now we decided to accelerate these programs. For example, in the Budapest plant here, there is a huge plant in Budapest, and recently we are accelerating this investment, the solar panel investment on the roof, which will provide a really significant portion of the energy consumption for this plant. The third one is actually obvious, that we have short-term actions related to that. So everywhere in the world now we are considering how we can really create additional savings, how we can optimize ourselves further. So with these 3 actions that we are feeling pretty safe. On the other hand, where we see significant risks, we see risk in our supplier side. So that's related to the smaller, medium-sized companies who didn't have this long-term thinking, can cause real problems. I think not only for us, but for the entire industry.
And of course, they don't have the benefits of the economies of scale to start with that you do. I'd like to come back to some of the short-term measures, but before we do that, I also want to involve our last speaker. Ákos, if anyone on this panel was going to be happy about what Ursula von der Leyen had to say, it's you, and what she was talking about hydrogen, because Linde is such a big player in hydrogen, and in fact, the event that you and Attila are off to is, I believe it's an event featuring a hydrogen-powered bus. So clearly, if you're going to an event with a hydrogen-powered bus, we have prototype buses that can operate on hydrogen. We also have the same with trains, but they are prototypes. How long before hydrogen becomes a meaningful everyday part of our lives, and how widespread will that be?
Okay, thank you for this question and the invitation as well. I have to start with hydrogen. Hydrogen is the most common element of the universe, and this is nothing new actually. So Linde Group is already producing hydrogen for decades, and we are developing applications, and we have solutions for 20-40 years ago as well. Just an example regarding these hydrogen-driven cars. We already tested in 2006 with BMW some liquid hydrogen-driven BMWs, which were used in Munich actually for testing purposes. So this is nothing new again. Yes, we really welcome this idea to have a hydrogen bank and give support for projects, and especially myself in Hungary, I could tell you that in the last 2 years I had more than 2,000 business discussions regarding hydrogen. Everyone wants to be part of it. Everyone will be somehow be part of the value chain, from production, from distribution, from storage, from energy, from grid balancing, for buses, for cars, for everything. So I think the momentum is here, but we need to be clear as well that hydrogen is not the solution for the energy crisis or energy situation what we have. Hydrogen, and especially clean hydrogen, how we call it, could help and will help for decarbonization for some of the industries, especially the industries where hydrogen cannot be replaced. For example, oil refinery or ammonia production or plastic production. Here we are using tons of hydrogen currently as well, and of course with clean hydrogen there could be an opportunity to decarbonize these industries, but it will not start from one day to another one because it requires investments. And investment is one aspect that we need to get support for these investments, because these are heavy millions of euro investments for a purpose which we don't know actually how we will achieve, and it is linked heavily to the CO2 emission and the CO2 certificate pricing as well, what is currently in Europe, which is not stabilized. So this is one aspect of the whole hydrogen industry from our side, that yes, there is an opportunity mainly in the industrial part, and this is already there. And when we come to the mobility, for the mobility, I have to say that these are the front runners. The personal cars, what we have in Hungary, there are two actually, which is driven on hydrogen. These are for me a kind of dogs and pony shows to show that hydrogen is really there, it's safe, we could use it for personal cars as well, but of course this is not the biggest target group of clean hydrogen or clean energy. The target group in mobility, mainly buses and trains, and we not only have prototypes, we have actually working examples. So in Germany, 3 weeks ago, Alstom, Linde, and then one of the countries in Germany just opened and handed over the first personal train. 14 trains will be operated by fuel cell, by hydrogen, and they have actually made a world record as well to drive a train for more than 1,000 kilometers on fuel cell. So this is already reality, and we know that in Hungary as well there are some samples and some wishes or ideas from MAV as well to think about the international fuel cell trains as well. So there are a lot of elements. But before we go into that, and you asked to have a short answer, cannot give you a short answer on this one, sorry for that. But before we go into this application part, we have to mention that green hydrogen in Hungary is not available yet. So for green hydrogen, there is only one company who could provide, and this is, I'm happy to say, it's Linde, but we cannot provide an industrial size yet. Everyone is focusing on investments. There are some ongoing projects, I have to say, but no materialization of these projects will happen within 2-3 years, or even later actually. And when we have that one, after that we need to have special knowledge how to transfer, how to distribute, and how to apply these kind of materials in the whole value chain as well. So a lot of trainings required as well. And when we talk about investments, one element is investment, and I always come back to Mr. Steiner to talk about this CapEx support, that companies would need this CapEx support for the investment. But even more important from our side is OpEx support or energy support, because with the current energy prices, what we have in the market, none of the green hydrogen projects will be supported by any board as from a business case point of view, because nowadays with the current energy prices, actually the green hydrogen or the clean hydrogen production cost is 6-7 times higher than normal grey hydrogen. And the question is that who is going to finance this part and how it could be actually put into the whole business portfolio of MOL Group, of Linde Group, of any other companies as well. And here, of course, CapEx and OpEx is always a big question, but what we learned from other countries, that integration is really important, and that's why we really welcome the idea from the government on formalizing hydrogen valleys, where they will put focus on having high hydrogen production capacities, clean hydrogen production capacities, and from that valley the hydrogen could be transported in various ways to different users as well. This, we believe, this kind of integration is a new way of thinking in Hungary as well, and in East Europe as well. This we need to learn how to think together as industry partners and how to take out the benefits as well. So solutions are there. These are not only prototyping. So in other countries like South Korea or in the US, in California or in Germany, there are already working solutions. Even in steel industries, we are using green hydrogen for decarbonizing steel industry. So there are solutions. Of course, the first step needs to be taken in Hungary, and I'm really looking forward to how the government and the industrial partners together will take the first steps in this one.
Very quickly, and it's probably impossible to answer, but a ballpark figure on when we might expect to be travelling on hydrogen trains in Hungary?
Probably this question goes to Mr. Steiner. I could guarantee that Linde could provide green hydrogen for any kind of application, which could come.
Attila, do you want to come back on that? Is there any reasonable time frame we can put on that?
I think as Ákos mentioned, it will be a transport sector and it will be trains and buses.
Yeah.
We already had, I think this summer, a 1 month demonstration of hydrogen-fueled bus in Hungary between Mérpliget and Vecsés for 1 month. So actually we have to also collect experiences, but very frankly, we need quite significant funding for that. And that's why we included our hydrogen segment, the boosting the hydrogen segment, into our RRF plan, which is now discussed with the European Union, because actually now, of course, taking into consideration the current supply security situation, we have very urgent segments where we have to put the current funding. So that's why we would rely very heavily on EU funding in case of the hydrogen. But I think we will have more clarity in the coming months on that and what is the timing for that.
Okay, but we're certainly not talking tomorrow. Victor, let me come back to you then, because what we can perhaps do, if we can't do hydrogen tomorrow, is get more gas today, or perhaps hydrogen will be next year and more gas will be tomorrow. There are gas supplies under Hungary that have not been tapped thus far. Does the change in the prices make them economically more viable? And so are you looking, we heard the State Secretary talk about a push to generate more domestic gas. So what's the story from your point of view on getting more gas out of the ground in Hungary, and when might that come online?
Yeah, actually, we are doing everything possible to maximize our gas production at the moment. So I can tell you that we are doing very extensive workover activities in existing fields to push up production. We are intensifying our drilling programs, and also we will intensify from next year the production of inert gases, high CO2 content gases, because we need everything, each and every gas molecule we can produce. But I have to say that we won't solve the energy crisis alone, because it's just impossible. It's Hungary's gas production is around 1.5 billion cubic meters a year. Actually, 90% of that is MOL's production. Hungary needs around 10 billion cubic meters of gas a year. So it's very evident that we cannot even get close to that amount. And the other thing is that we produce hydrocarbons in the German-Hungarian basin for more than 80 years. Which means that this is a very, very major hydrocarbon basin. And in such an environment, actually there's a thing which is called natural decline. Mm-hmm. So this is a mining industry. We are mining materials, not steel or whatever, but hydrocarbons, liquid or gases, but still reserves deplete. So it's as reserves deplete, your production is decreasing as well. This is called natural decline. In our basin, in natural gas production, this can be 15-20% production decrease per year, which means that if we don't do any investment, this would be the decrease of production, which you would see. So you can imagine how much effort we need just to keep the production level. Currently we will be able to increase the production somewhat, but there's no doubling or such thing possible, because we have to first offset the natural decline with all the investments. But still, we will do whatever we can. But this is just a part of the solution, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I think that's an important point. But whether we talk about solar or wind or whatever, they're all component parts of the solution, not the solution themselves. Talking about two other component parts, MOL has a regional hat to wear in this. What can we expect? Can you do more on bringing in LPG? And it's not specifically your field, I know, but for example, the Romanian gas fields, I'm sure the government would love to see those opened very, very quickly. Do you have any kind of insight into when that might happen?
Yeah, the Romanian offshore won't be producing for at least a few years. I would say, in the best case, it can start production maybe 5 to 7 years from now, but it's really best case, and still there would be a ramp-up phase, most probably. So it can all be almost a decade until we see peak production there. So it won't save us this winter or next winter. Actually, gas security of supply is a state competence. Here, as MOL, what I can say that currently we are self-sufficient from gas. We produce somewhat more gas than what we call as MOL Group. Well, if this would change in the future, of course, then we would have to buy some gas. But again, there has to be some molecules in the region, so we are able to do that. And LNG is an interesting direction, but it's important that to increase the share of LNG in the energy mix of the region. Again, quite some investments are needed also on the liquefaction or the gasification side. So we have some capacity already in Poland. It will come online, and it's online, and more will come online. And in Croatia we have close to 3 billion cubic meters. But if we compare these capacities to the demand of the region, it's pretty marginal. So that's one thing, and the other thing is that to Hungary, the gas has to come somehow as well. And although we did a lot of investments, MOL is also the owner of FGS, and we have the interconnectors with all the countries except for Slovenia, which the one doesn't really make sense most probably. But still, how the gas gets to these interconnectors and what kind of gas, that's a question, I believe. So both on the gasification and the infrastructure side, we would need further investments to increase the role of LNG in the region.
And I suppose the other problem with LNG is, okay, fine, you have to be able to receive it and distribute it, but you're also competing on the world market for prices, and Asia has a big say in that.
Yeah, we will see it. We will see this more and more. This will be more and more typical. Crude oil market is a global market for long decades, and the natural gas market is becoming a global market as well, more and more, thanks to LNG. Still, the transportation costs will relatively be higher than that for oil. So we will be able to see some bigger regional differences, even if it's a global market, but still, it's more and more connected as well.
Okay, thank you. There's plenty more we could discuss from up here, but we were anxious to open it up to the floor and we are beginning to approach the cut-off time for the State Secretary. So, are there any questions for our panel from the floor? Don't worry if they're not, because I've got loads more I can ask. Anyone? Sir? If you just wait a second, sir, there's a microphone coming towards you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Hello? Okay, I think I'm loud enough. So I have a question. So 25% of the energy consumption of private households, roughly about, right? And I learned about the electrification. And so there's a potential on private household to electrify 25% of the energy consumption. And there are existing programs to support, for example, photovoltaic investments. And I have two questions. Are these programs are going to be extended and maybe even enlarged to heat pump usage? And the second question is, how do you make sure that investors are getting the grants paid out? Because I invested last year and I got now 5 times a rejection of my grant application and I still don't have the money. So these are my two questions.
Heat pumps are very much one of the buzzwords of the day. Attila, I'm guessing that's yours to answer.
Yes, maybe a short general overview on the deployment of solar. Now we have around 3,000 megawatt solar capacity on the grid. Just for comparison, Hungarian consumption is around 7,100, 200. So it's quite significant what we have already on the grid. But we have many additional applications and even contracts for new investments. And if all those will be online on the grid, then it's around 13,000 megawatt. So almost the double of the consumption. So now, actually, what is the bottleneck? It's more the grid. How the grid can absorb such quick deployment of solar. And that's why parallelly we introduced a very heavy grid enforcement program. It's more than 100 billion Hungarian forints are already for Movir and for the distribution system operators there. So that will allow to accelerate the connection of solars to the grid. And parallelly, we also introduced the program for batteries. Also large-scale battery centers for the grid operators. And we will come, I think still this year, with a program, with a support scheme for private operators to install more batteries. Because battery together with solar panels, that would be the solution. Because that will reduce, or we will be able to control the costs on balancing electricity. Because now balancing electricity is really expensive. Unfortunately, during the last 10-15 years, there was no new build in Hungary in terms of traditional, conventional power plants, which would be as a backup of solar. So that's why we pay more for balancing electricity than Germany in total. So that's why we have to very heavily invest into other power plants also to keep the prices and the grid intact. Support schemes on solar deployment. We have the so-called METAR, which is a tendering-based scheme for ensuring a safe revenue for investors. But now, of course, market prices are much higher than the METAR price, which is set. So I think now the incentive from the market side is there. Now what we are working very heavily, this is the connection part, how we can make more transparent the whole connection issue, and also to provide or create such an environment where we enable to continue with this deployment of solars. But it's not so obvious because we reached almost the limit of the grid, and now it takes time and it needs parallel actions in order to be able to continue. But we would like to continue because at least we have some domestic electricity generation which is green, and I think this is a big value nowadays. But of course, it's not a continuous electricity generation, so we have to solve the issue of balancing and grid stability, but we are working on that. So it's a very complex package, and now this autumn, this winter, we will introduce also some regulatory changes which enable to keep this objective, and it will be quite a wide-ranging package, so we are working on that.
Yes, ma'am.
So I have a question to the State Secretary. You talked about investments in the grid, what is absolutely necessary to cover this big mess of renewable energy. Normally, so as you said, it's done by Mavie and the distribution system operator. Normally, investments in grid have consequences via the regulatory system on the grid fees. And as consequences of increasing grid fees, also the end consumer prices rises. For the normal household, it's covered by the USB price, but for the industry, it's mostly free. So how you deal with this price increase for the industry, which is an absolutely reasonable consequence of investments in the grid.
On one side, of course, investments should increase the grid tariffs because the regulated asset base and the return on that investment is covered by the fees. On the other side, if we invest, then we can connect more renewables, and if we invest into power generation assets, then that will also reduce the burden, since we will have cheaper balancing energy in Hungary. And we will have more local energy, which is generated here on a cheap way. So I think these two shall be put together, and hopefully we can balance the two effects. And of course, the first solution is if we would have the access to EU funds, that could also ease the burden of investments, financial burden of the investments, because that would be financed from the Recovery and Resilience Facility. And then, of course, we should not reflect all of the costs on the grid tariffs. So that would be the idea how we can keep grid tariffs affordable. But for that, we have to do several homeworks.
Cross fingers.
There's nothing wrong with cross fingers. Anyone else have a question for our panel? Maybe someone other than Attila, just to give his voice. Okay. Barbara.
I'm sorry, but I think my question is also for us. Sorry about this, but you mentioned a couple of times the EU funds for all of the investments to be made. We cross our fingers also for this issue, but what is the plan B if they don't come? So much seems to depend on the funds.
Actually, now we are focusing on plan A. That EU funds will arrive, and we put all of the efforts to negotiations. And I have to tell you, we have already several rounds and reconstructive discussions with the European Commission. I'm responsible for the energy negotiations, and we are very close in the energy segment. Of course, it's part of a much bigger package, which includes several other topics, but I think also other ministers and other ministries are doing their job. So we are quite optimistic on that. And actually taking into consideration the size of this investment package, I think that's comparable to the EU funds which we could receive. And our plan is that before we had the opinion that we would go only for the grant part of the Recovery and Resilience Facility. But of course, in the current situation, the energy situation and the urgency to implement this transition, that in consequence of that, the government changed its position, and actually we would like to also take the loan part. And the loan part, the majority of the loan part could go to the energy transition projects. So that's our idea. I think now we have to focus 100% on the negotiations, and if it's not successful, then we have to prepare our plan B, but it's not the main topic now.
Yes, sir. Yeah, coming to hydrogen, even if green hydrogen, even if we have enough maybe solar energy, because wind is not that popular in Hungary, provocative question is, do we have enough water? What I heard is that you need about 10 liters of water or kilograms, which is quite identical, to produce one green hydrogen. And as we know, Hungary has the Danube, but we also know that the levels are lower. So my question is a reasonable scale of green hydrogen production really feasible in Hungary?
Thank you, Dale. Thanks for you.
Maybe I take it. Thanks for the question. I think water is not a question. The question is more about what is reasonable scale. Currently, the hydrogen valleys are talking about 300-400 megawatts of electrolyzers put in one place. Probably for that size, water could be a question. What we are considering from any kind of business point of view, in any partner, is 10, 24, 40 megawatt electrolyzers. For that, I would say water is not a question. The question is renewable energy, and here I have to come back to wind. We really vote for getting wind turbines as well, because photovoltaic is just working for 18% of a year, so we still need to have other renewable energy, and we have really welcomed actually the decision from the European Commission to use nuclear as well. So we believe that Hungary, as having a nuclear power plant, and most probably another one sooner or later, could be actually getting nuclear power as well for getting cheap and clean energy for green hydrogen. And this is the key actually, to get cheap energy, cheap clean energy for green hydrogen. If it's not available, nothing will fly.
Middle of the room, lady at the back there.
Thank you. My question is actually regarding LNG and regarding LNG infrastructure mostly, and if there are more mid-term and long-term projects regarding LNG infrastructure are coming within Hungary. Because on one hand, of course, LNG can help with to diversify gas supply, but on the other hand, it is problematic in terms of this region, which is landlocked. Thank you.
Victor, do you want to start on that one, and then, or Attila, if you want to go?
Yes, thank you. I think here the scales are very important. So Russia's supply to Europe, it's approximately 150 billion cubic meters. It's 40% of Europe's gas consumption is covered by the Russian supply, and that was cut very significantly. So now we have around 10-20 billion cubic meter Russian supply. And actually what also President Biden offered to Europe, that the US could increase its LNG production and LNG deliveries to Europe. But that's the scale of that is 50 billion cubic meters, so 1/3 of the Russian supply by 2030. So these are the scales. So actually we cannot replace pipeline gas so quickly with LNG. Of course, here environmental concerns are also there, since LNG shall be transported by long distances with very polluting ships. So I think this is also not an optimal solution, of course, but in terms of diversification, a very important option which we have to take. And as Viktor said, it's very difficult in this region because now we do not have the sufficient regasification capacities for that. For Hungary, as a landlocked country, we do not have direct access to those investments. We can book capacities. That's what we have done in Krik, in Croatia, but it's only a 1 or 1.5 billion cubic meter capacity which is booked there. And actually, it's out of our control to develop such kind of facilities. So, as Viktor mentioned, if so we can access natural gas if it's in the region, because we have all of the interconnectors and we have a very strong grid. And we have also very big capacity of underground gas storages located within Hungary. Here the key challenge is how we get to new sources or diversify sources, because it's out of our remit. So we have to always negotiate with partners, and the partners shall be on board to make real investments. And I think actually this is the key challenge here. That's the challenge also in Romania with the new field. What is a quicker option for the country? It's already existing supplies, how they can be redirected towards Hungary. So that would be a potential new source like Azeri gas, which is coming to Europe. But maybe that would be an idea that those countries who are importing Azeri gas, they should increase their LNG consumption, and then the excess capacity which is superfluous, that should come into our region, but it requires a very complex negotiation and cooperation among partners. We are quite happy that the European Commission also understood these regional specificities, and actually they set up some regional groups now. They set up a new EU energy platform, which is responsible for purchasing new gas sources and coordinate basically all of the EU endeavors. So this is quite a new unit in the European Commission, and we are also very closely cooperating with that new unit. And here this regional approach is there, so regional cooperation is there, and that might help to access new gas sources, but it's a very complicated and not a short-term solution to access those capacities.
I think I'm going to, Barbara, if it's quick, I'll give you the last question.
Thank you for being so kind. The very last question then is looking into wind. Ákos mentioned that it could really complement the situation, and we also know until now it hasn't been very popular in Hungary, but what is the roadmap for wind in Hungary?
Yes, in the current situation, of course, we have to rethink all of our previous decisions, and now we are also considering all type of energy carriers which can be used preferably quickly. And that's why we are also now considering whether we would ease the regulation on wind. It's still not decided, however, we think that it may have some reason, and in the current situation. I think it's very important still to consider that yes, we may have bigger capacities installed than currently. However, in comparison with other countries in the region, we do not have the best potential for wind. Of course, it has some advantages because wind blows also in the night and there is no solar production, but it has and additional advantages that it requires much less land than solar. However, it has some disadvantages, and here also the public perception is also not so obvious. So we are reconsidering. It's still not decided, but I wouldn't exclude that we will move into that direction. But I don't expect that all Hungary will be full of wind parks, because it's not realistic, taking into consideration the potential for wind. Here, solar has much better potentials.
Thank you, Attila. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your questions. But we do need to bring this to a conclusion. So what do we take out of this? And this is perhaps a silly thing to say for a business audience, but I think perhaps the key thing that I keep coming back to is money and investment. That the way out of this is to invest across the board. We have the view from Linde. We have a potential in hydrogen, which is already beyond the prototype, but it's not going to be there tomorrow. It's going to take us time to get there, and that's going to require investment of time and money. From MOL, we were not surprised to learn that while you can accept a short-term necessity for a cap, or indeed for a windfall tax, or a Robin Hood tax, or a solidarity contribution, or whatever you want to call it, that you have to be careful not to kill the golden goose. And that while we can bring on board new gas supplies, we also have to remember that what we've got is decreasing. And from András talking for business, and I'm sorry you didn't say more, András, but I think one of the points you made, which is really important, is that big companies like yours can undertake long-term planning, and you're now seeing the benefit from that. But the concern that you have, and we should all have, is whether the SMEs who supply you, and at least partially supply you, can keep up with that. From the State Secretary, from Attila, we learn with pleasure that we are moving full steam ahead on Plan A and trying to get that money as soon as possible. I think everyone here would like to wish you good luck with those negotiations, and the hope that we don't need a Plan B, but look forward equally to being able to invest those funds once you've got your hands on them. But I think I'll leave you with a phrase from our host here, the GM here at the New York Palace, who said, and I like to end positively if I can, we will find a way. We kind of have to, so I assume that everyone here would like to work their way towards a better future. We can't control everything, control what we can, and find a better way, I would think would be the best way forward for all of us. So it just falls to me to thank once again our panel, and if you could show your appreciation in the usual way, I would appreciate it. Firstly, we had State Secretary for Energy and Climate Policy at the Ministry of Technology and Industry, Attila Steiner. Sitting next to him, András Sávos, President, of course, of the German-Hungarian Chamber of Industry and Commerce, and Vice President and Head of Digitalization and Process Optimization at Knorr-Bremse. Viktor Sverla, Head of Group Strategy at MOL Group. And last but by no means least, even though he's at the end of the line, Ákos Hegedűs, Managing Director of Linde Gáz Magyarország Zrt. Thank you, gentlemen, for all of your input. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your questions. All that's left for me to do is to hand back to Barbara, I believe, because you have some chamber messages to pass on.
Yes, exactly. First of all, thank you very much to you, Robin, Editor-in-Chief at BBJ, for moderating this session. I know we could have talked like hours more, so I would like to ask Attila if we can send you the remaining questions that we couldn't cover today, or maybe not sufficiently cover today. Yeah, and
to join you next time.
Yes, that's also an option. Come again, and in the meantime, we just pass on to you what we get as inquiries. But one important thing that I would like to mention is you were talking about Plan A, and this also involves lots of discussions on country level, on the EU level, and I think I don't divulge any secret when I say that Prime Minister Orban is coming to Germany in October, and our chamber, together with two partner organizations in Germany, will host a Wirtschaftsforum, economic forum with Prime Minister Orban and also Minister Seato and Minister Palkovic. So those of you who might not have received an invitation yet, we are happy to send it to you so that you or a headquarter representative in Germany has the chance to join this event on October 10th in Berlin in the afternoon. So this was my message, and thanks again to all of you for coming this morning, and then we let Attila Steiner go to the next event, which is about the Green Bus Program. Thank you all.